So let me give an introduction to our speaker who we're so grateful to have you with us today, Governor Cox. Spencer Cox was born and raised in Fairview, Utah, just a few miles south of, well, more than a few miles, but in Sanpete County, where I think there are far more livestock than there are inhabitants down there. And he met the First Lady of Utah, Abby Cox, when he was in high school. They were high school sweethearts when he returned from a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Mexico. They married. They attended SNO, Utah State. Governor Cox graduated from Washington and Lee University in Lexington, Virginia. Came back to Utah and was involved in clerked for Judge Stewart at the U.S. District Court in Salt Lake City, and then went into private practice before moving back to Fairview, Utah, and involved as a telecom executive there, but also got engaged in public service in a real meaningful way. Ran for mayor, was part of the county commission, then ran for the state legislature. And while he was a state legislator in the House there, Governor Gary Herbert in 2013, when his lieutenant governor stepped away for other work, asked Spencer Cox if he would be his lieutenant governor. And he served in a distinguished capacity there since 2013. Of course, in 2020, Spencer Cox ran in what was a strategically smart and really beautifully civil campaign for governor that's actually received accolades around the country. We can talk a little bit about that. Utah's 18th governor. We are very pleased to provide a warm BYU welcome to Governor Spencer Cox.
Thank you, Quinn.
Okay, Governor.
Thank you, Paul, for that very kind introduction. It's great to be here. The best part of being here is that I'm not wearing a tie, and that they are. So it's good to be here.
So we'll just give you a chance. Do you have any opening thoughts as we get underway?
Well, I'm sure we'll touch on these things. I'm so grateful for BYU and the Wheatley. I should say, if you don't know this about me, I grew up a diehard BYU everything fan. I was the crazy kid at the games that blue paint, white chest, that kind of stuff, right? And my dear wife, who I love deeply, I asked her to marry me. She said yes. I said, we'll go to BYU together. She said, I'll be in Logan. If you want to marry me, you'll be an Aggie. And I'm an Aggie. So that's how that worked out. But still, BYU holds a deep place in my heart. I was listening to a podcast a few days ago, Jonah Goldberg from The Remnant, and he was interviewing Yuval Levin, who we both know and respect deeply, who talks a lot about institutions. And this is an institution, Wheatley and BYU, an institution that is so important. But I'm deeply worried about the decay of institutions, specifically religious institutions, and a lot of my thoughts were along that. Some data that came out a couple weeks ago showed, again, no surprise, that we're lonelier than ever before, lonelier than we were the year before as Americans. And where is that other place where we make connections and meet people and come together? Historically, religion has played probably an outsized place in those connections. And as we look at religious participation, the fastest growing religion in this country is none, not N-U-N, N-O-N-E, the nuns, that fewer and fewer people belong to any organized religion at all. And whether you believe in religion, you probably do if you're here on campus, or not, whether you think faith is a good thing or not, everyone knows and admits that community matters, and if we're losing it in those places, what are we replacing it with? And that's what I'm most concerned about, because we seem to be replacing it with nothing, or worse, with social media, and that is not an adequate replacement for reasons that have been well documented. Those are kind of where my
Well,
thoughts are today.
thank you. Look, I know you recently had here in Salt Lake City the National Governors Association. You're the vice chair for the National Governors Association, which I think means that you'll be the chair next year. Is
In
that
July, correct?
Okay.
Yeah.
But they met here. They talked about some important initiatives. Were there any insights that came out of that that would be interesting for the youth here?
Yeah, I think so. There are probably dozens, but I'll pick one. So just a little background. The way this works with the National Governors Association, all 50 governors participate. One pundit has said that the governors are the last adults left in the room when it comes to politics. And this organization is a bipartisan organization, and we rotate every year, a Republican, a Democrat, Republican, Democrat, and each team decides who their next one is. So there's an election that's held. Republicans vote for a Republican and decide, and then Democrats vote for the Democrat. We've been very fortunate in Utah. We've had, I think I'm the third or fourth governor to be the chair of the National Governors Association. New Jersey is the chair now, and it's the first time New Jersey's ever had a governor in that role, which is interesting. But I only say that to say this: the chair has an initiative every year that we work on together, and this chair, Governor Murphy, has chosen youth mental health as his initiative, and very timely. So he wanted to hold the very first meeting in Utah, which he did, because we have a lot to share with the country, and we had experts come together, and I could talk about youth mental health and social media and some of the problems. By the way, Wheatley had a very interesting, I believe, some research that you guys have done that found that yes, social media is a problem with youth, but it's also a problem with parents. No surprise. But as young people are competing for their parents' attention and having to compete against Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, it's causing problems, and we're seeing that. But here's the takeaway. We had a neuroscientist from UCLA who was in the room, not a member of the LDS faith, and she was talking about real practical things that we can do. It's not just that social media is bad, it is, but it's also, what is it replacing? So what are we doing? Since we're doing that, what aren't we doing? And she said one of the best things we can do for the mental health of our youth is service. They found, this is brain science. This isn't just, faith, like you should go out and do good. Like, we believe that. But this is brain science showing that when kids, young people and adults, by the way, participate in service projects, giving back, their mental health improves significantly. In fact, it is she said it's probably the best intervention we can do, non-medical intervention that we can do with young people to improve their mental health. And inevitably, I asked the question, well, I believe that we're having conversations about adding a requirement for high school and college graduation in the state, adding a service requirement. And she said, let me just tell you, you'll get people pushing back and saying, well, if you coerce service or if you mandate service, then it's not the same. And she said, and they are wrong. She said, coercive service works the same way. If you make kids show up and serve, it actually is really good. The brain science is there. So I'm all about coercive service, whatever it takes. Sometimes it takes me. We all hate to, like, do we have to do this again? And then you show up and you're like, I'm really glad I did that. Yeah.
Great. Did you have a question?
I do.
I
do. Over the last few months, Utah County residents have witnessed an effort to develop Utah Lake, proposed by a group called Lake Restoration Solutions, that includes a proposal to dredge the lake and build a series of islands. Some opposition has arisen from local political environmental leaders, including some BYU colleagues, who have asserted that the development plans are not a restoration at all, and if followed through, development plans would have a devastating long-term effect on the ecosystem of the lake. So I guess my question is, What's your position on the development of Utah Lake?
Well, look, so there is a process that these types of proposals have to go through, and so that process is playing out. I appreciate the feedback that has been given. I haven't taken a position on that specific project itself, and I think again, as both sides are able to make their case, you look at what funding for that would look like. I mean, we're going to look very closely at the science of this, and what we're hearing is that there are some deep problems with the science, and so it's helpful to hear back from that. I will say that Utah Lake, though, I believe, and I've said this for a long time, is one of the most underappreciated and underutilized assets that we have in this state. I don't know how insane it is. I don't know if we realize that. Like, look, I live an hour away from Utah Lake. Never been to Utah Lake, and neither has anyone else where I live. It's kind of a trash lake. I mean, that's not a scientific statement. It's just, it's incredibly shallow. We have these algal blooms that are happening constantly. I believe that lake needs some love and care. And I believe that the health of that lake is also important for the health of the Great Salt Lake as those lakes are combined. And so I do think, I do think deepening parts of the lake are important. I don't know that we should be building islands and houses. That, again, that's going to go through the process. But I do believe that making that lake, improving the environment of that lake, reducing the toxins that are being dumped into that lake, that those are types of things that will be better for the environment, will be better for our water storage, will be better for the Great Salt Lake, and will also be better for the economy and the enjoyment of the people that live here, so that it becomes a destination, a place where people actually want to go and recreate. And I think we can do that. And we're very serious about doing that. Whether it's this project or some other project, we're committed to doing better.
I'll just follow up and invite you to come take a tour of the lake sometime.
I would love to do that. I mean, I've now been to the lake.
Okay,
I just think growing up as governor, you go check this stuff out, right? But and I know some people do recreate there and they love it, but if it's not very high on the list of places in Utah where you want to go recreate.
So we talked about Utah Lake. You've mentioned the Great Salt Lake. Maggie Christensen has a question for you about the health of the Great Salt Lake. And I'm going to just sort of add into this just a little thing, because I'm aware that you recently returned from a trip to the Middle East where you were in, I think, Dubai and Israel, where they're world renowned for water conservation. We're in a historic drought. The lake's drying up. Give us some thoughts about what the future looks like for the Great Salt Lake.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. We did. We went to the United Arab Emirates, both Dubai and Abu Dhabi, both Emirates. We spent a lot of time in Israel. We brought members of the legislature with us, members of our natural resources team, and that was the purpose. To look, these are deserts. These are people who have figured out how to do more with less than anyone else in the world, and there are lessons that we can learn from them, and we are learning those lessons. I like to say this, Maggie, wherever you are, thank you for asking the question. I'm less worried about our water situation today than I was a year ago. And people always say, well, how can that be? And it's because Maggie asked the question. It's because everywhere I go, by the way, I'm doing 8 of these today. It's a big day. Everywhere I go, I get asked this question. And the reason that matters to me is paradigms don't change quickly, usually. How many of us grew up not knowing that there were actual seatbelts in our vehicles? They were tucked down in the cushions, right? Like, it took years for that kind of change to happen where, oh, there is a seatbelt and I should probably wear it so I don't die. I thought it was going to take us, we had kind of a 5-year plan for convincing Utahns that we need to make sacrifices and use less water. The plan to convince legislators was a little longer than that, because usually they lag behind. And then it all changed. It changed. I don't know exactly how it changed with the residents of Utah, but I can tell you over the course of 6 months, I saw it change. I never got asked about the Great Salt Lake or water. I get asked about it all the time now. I can tell you exactly when it changed with our legislature. We were pushing through a dozen water conservation bills, and they were not going anywhere. And one morning, the Speaker of the House called and said, "Hey, can we borrow a couple Black Hawk helicopters and from the National Guard?" And I said, "Can you tell me why? You don't just." He's like, "Well, I want to take the legislators on a tour of the Great Salt Lake. I want to get them out over the top of it." I said, "Yes, absolutely, yes." Legislators love going for helicopter rides. It turns out, so does everyone. But so they all show up. They go out over the lake and they get off, and I'm having conversations with them, and immediately everything had changed. I don't know what it is about seeing pictures versus seeing the real thing, but the real thing had an impact. And all 12 of those bills passed quickly, and there were more coming, over $500 million of conservation. So I am very, very, very optimistic about the future because people are committed. If you drove around your neighborhood, saw the yellow lawns, the brown lawns this year, those are people willingly sacrificing and saying, "Hey, this is important, I'm going to do my part." And the legal changes that we've made are going to have a huge impact. So I'm actually excited to see that we can collectively change our minds and make a difference, and it's happening in real time, right before us. So stay tuned. There's a lot more. By the way, one thing that really helps is when you get 3 inches of water in a storm like we had this weekend. Yeah. I just need 20 more of those. Yes, we'll probably flood some houses, but we'll also fill the Great Salt Lake.
Okay.
I'm going to ask 2 questions. One very quickly from Nicole. Does pineapple belong on pizza?
Oh, you know what? These are the types. I'm going to be a real politician here, you guys. Usually I like to get to the heart of the matter, but I think we should just let people enjoy their pizza however they want it. We don't need to judge each other. This divisiveness is tearing our country apart, and we've got to stop this right now. So if you want your pineapple, you can have your pineapple, all right? If you don't, that's fine too. Let's not judge.
You've just lost the vote of every non-pineapple eating person.
It's true.
The more serious question, you're quite active on social media, especially Twitter.
Yeah.
And so and this is a question from Natalie Ibsen, and she says, why do you feel that that's important as a civic leader? And what's your goal for interacting with the people of Utah on social media?
I ask myself that question all the time. More so recently. It seems like my goal is to make everyone mad. That's all I seem to be accomplishing lately. And so I appreciated social media. And one of the things I liked about Twitter specifically was that it was an opportunity to engage with people. It was almost like having a town hall every day. I felt like it connected me in a way for a long time, and mostly in a way that was fun and healthy. In that I could have fun, like we had Utah Jazz Twitter. I found that Taylor Swift Twitter is also a thing now. So there were all these kind of different groups and people that cared about something and wanted to share it and talk about it. Politics, of course, political Twitter has always been there. I'm enjoying it much less than I did before because, first of all, I realize that Twitter and lots of social media, but especially Twitter, is not representative of the collective, not representative of citizenry as a whole. It has also gotten much more polarized over time and just much less fun. There's less kind of civil engagement that's happening there. And so I'm rethinking the value proposition of that right now, and especially going back to some of the harms that I've talked about as people get more and more addicted, and the algorithms. By the way, I do not use the native Twitter app. I use a different app to avoid some of those algorithms. Like I have my own feed, and my own feed that is very unique to me, and it's just the people that I really want to hear from and interact from, and so that's a little different. But I am worried about the negative implications that these social media companies and their products are having on our society, and so. I suspect in the coming days you'll see probably less of me, and I don't know that that's a good thing. I mean, I think we should want leaders to be engaged and to be true to themselves. It was helpful for me, again, to connect with people, to help people understand who I am. One of the problems I think we have is that people and leaders are something different on social media than they are in real life. And I've always hoped that if you just followed me on Twitter, or social media, and then you met me in real life, that I would be exactly who you thought I was, that should be a true representation of me, but it's becoming less and less of that. I know some really great people who are really awful on social media, and so that's not helpful. And I hate to pull myself out of that sphere. Some of you know Senator Ben Sass. He was also very active on social media. One of my favorite people to follow. And I want to say about 3 or 4 years ago, he just said, "I'm out. I'm done." And that was the end of him on social media. And I miss him in that space. And I hate to lose good people in that space, but I'm getting close.
So the bad money drives out the good. It's
Sure.
kind of a Gresham's law.
Yeah.
There are a lot of questions that are coming through about civility generally.
Okay.
Dan Broadbent, for example, asks, the good news, interest in politics is very high. The bad news discussions seem to be tailored to the lowest common denominator and resort to extremist themes and rhetoric. What can we do to promote reasonable and civil behavior in politics? So you've talked about it a little bit in social media, but you said retreat. But I don't think that would be your, I mean,
No, retreat is certainly not, it shouldn't be an option. This is one I struggle with the most, and I think everybody's kind of struggling with this one. Is how do we gain back what we've lost? How does that pendulum swing back? Does the exhausted majority, we used to call the silent majority, does the exhausted majority ever really get fed up enough that they're willing to engage? And there's so much around this, so much research and discourse of what we can do to help bring that back. But the incentive structures just aren't aligned. So social media is a big piece of this. Jonathan Haidt wrote an amazing piece in The Atlantic a few months ago that I would encourage all of you to read if you haven't. Jonathan is a professor in New York. He thinks about this stuff. I think it was called The Dumbest Decade or something. I don't remember exactly, something like that. Long form, but about the way social media has impacted this negativity. But again, the incentive structure, if you're a politician, and kind of the way we select our politicians, especially through the primary process, it's the incentive there is to always go to the extremes. And that's what we're seeing more and more of all the time. And again, the social media algorithms lead you to extremes. The cable media is built around the extremes, getting us addicted to outrage. All of this is to get us addicted to this thing. And as politics replaces those institutions that I talked about before, right? When politics becomes your religion, when that's so damaging, and that is exactly what is happening. In my own faith, I talk to leaders of my faith all the time. I was an ecclesiastical leader in my faith, and we saw people leaving our faith on the left for years because maybe the politics didn't line up. Now we're seeing it on the right in ways that we haven't seen historically, and that politics as religion is just so very difficult. And so I've tried to do some things. Certainly, I've tried to speak differently, and sometimes I fall into that. I tweeted something about progressive politics in San Francisco, and how that city's falling apart. And I went there and talked to progressives in San Francisco who told me that their policies were tearing the city apart. But it was seen as incredibly divisive and controversial. And I probably should have worded it differently. Probably should have done some things differently there. But one of the things we tried was my opponent and I. In this, and you referred to it, Paul. We did an ad together. Some of you may have seen it, where we said we got on. We got a camera. Got together and we had a script that said, I think you should vote for me. And he said, Chris Peterson, Democrat, said, I think you should vote for me. But the one thing we agree on is that we can disagree without hating each other. That we can try to be united and better, and we can support the election, and we can avoid the discord and divisiveness. And that ad went viral, which surprised both of us. I don't think we expected that to happen, which shows that I think there is an appetite for that. There was some research done recently out of Stanford. They used that and some other interventions where they actually showed that ad to people, and then they would ask them questions before and afterward. They had a control group and found out that ad itself actually had a significant and statistically significant decrease in hostility amongst the people who watched it. Now, it only lasted for a few weeks, and then they were hostile again. But it did show that there are some interventions that can work, but they're hard. And politicians, it's so much easier. Listen, guys, my job would be so much easier if I just watched Fox News and then said the very same thing every day. It would be so much easier. And that's what a lot of politicians do. Same thing on the left, by the way. I'm not just singling us out. And yet, I don't think that that's healthy. I don't think that that's the right way. So we'll keep trying and see what happens.
Okay, Quinn?
I've got a related question to that one, and it comes partly from something that Boston Kelly has submitted and partly from my own thinking about this. I have data, and I've seen other data in Utah that suggests that a majority of Utahns, especially a majority of Republicans in Utah, believe that the 2020 election was fraudulent and have no confidence in our election administration. So this question by Boston is particularly important, I think. He says, what actions do you think state-level political officials can take to restore confidence in our electoral system? Do you think we'll see a repeat of the crisis on January 6th, 2021?
So I think, what we can do is not lie about what we know. and that is, there are a whole bunch of politicians who actually believe that the elections were not corrupt, and yet refuse to say it. And I think that's deeply problematic. I can tell you what we've been doing in Utah to help raise the level of trust in our elections. First of all, if you go back, I was a lieutenant governor. So in Utah, the lieutenant governor oversees elections, but elections are run at the county level, always. So we don't run elections at the state level or the federal level, despite some federal policies that are trying to change that. Elections are run at the county level. Every election, even a presidential election, is a county election. Your county clerk is in charge and runs those elections. Our job is to help them, oversee them, make sure they do it the right way, and hold them accountable. So I spoke out at every turn. You actually have to go back to 2016 and actually probably back to 2000. But I was in law school then. But 2016, we had then candidate Trump talking about the potential for election fraud, again with no evidence whatsoever. But then when he won, we had Democrats and the left saying that the election had to be fraudulent, that there's no way that could have happened, and there were challenges there. Well, that just got kind of put on steroids 4 years later, and we are where we are. So what my Lieutenant Governor, Deidre Henderson from Utah County, she's amazing. What she has been doing is working with county clerks and inviting anyone who will come to visit their county clerk's office, to sit down, go look at the machines, watch them process them, show them how everything works, show them the dozens of security measures that take place so that no one can see what your vote is, and to make sure that your vote is accurately counted. And it really is remarkable. And we have had people walk in there who are convinced that Utah elections are fraudulent and come out and be the biggest offenders, saying, I was wrong, I've seen it, I know how this works, and I'm really pleased with it. And I'm proud to say that a recent Desert News poll asked, do you have faith in Utah's election system? And we 89% this last week, 2 weeks ago, said yes, we do have faith in the elections. That's a 7-point rise. Now, nationally, that's a different issue. And there are still a whole bunch of people that believe that it was fraudulent, despite the fact that over 60 judges, many of them Republican-appointed judges, many of them Trump-appointed judges, have dismissed any of those crazy claims that are out there. And I don't know how. I mean, we keep working, we keep trying, we keep messaging, we keep doing everything we can. But as long as you have people especially politicians who believe that if they lose, it must be fraud, then it's impossible to ever get on top of this issue.
I'll just note that one of our fellows, Tom Griffith, former federal judge who had been appointed by Bush, he and a group of other Republican legal experts put together this very comprehensive brief looking at the 60-plus cases that showed that the 2020 election, there was no case, right, through the federal courts adjudicated that indicated that there was fraud sufficient to overturn the outcome of the election.
Yeah, and that report is really incredible. It is the most comprehensive report that has been done on the 2020 election. They went through every single allegation of potential fraud and were able to show that none of them had any merit whatsoever. So
I'll back up your claim about visiting the county clerk. We sponsored an event through Civic Engagements from some of our students last week that was a visit to the county clerk's office as part of the Campus Cup competition that the Lieutenant Governor's office sponsors. And we had not a great turnout, but a reasonably good turnout. And some of the people that came were a little dubious, and it was pretty eye-opening to have them spend an hour or an hour and a half just getting fully briefed on every procedure that they go through to ensure the security of ballots.
Thanks for doing that. Yeah, it is remarkable, and I would encourage anyone to go check it out. And by the way, it doesn't mean we're perfect. Like every year we pass a new bill. We have an elections bill to improve on things we learned from last time. So it's not like we think everything's perfect at all. We take feedback and we improve on it. One of the big changes we made this year is people had concern, again, no evidence, but concern that ballot drop boxes could potentially be compromised. And so what we did was we said, okay, that's fair. Let's look at that. And we passed a bill that now requires electronic surveillance on every drop box. So we have video surveillance now of every drop box in the state. That makes me feel better, even though we don't have any evidence that there were any problems. Why not do something more? And so we're always trying to improve, and I think that's healthy.
How long has Utah been doing vote by mail?
So we, it's been over a decade now that we kind of started. And this is one of when people ask, why is Utah doing so well with vote by mail and other states are struggling? The reason is, I think, how we rolled it out is really helpful. First of all, this will surprise a lot of people. It was the Republican Party that really pushed for vote by mail. Yeah. And Republican Party leadership back in 2010, Thomas Wright, who some of you know, was very involved in making that happen. And so we passed it. At first, it was optional, and then we let counties start opting in. First of all, cities could do it, municipalities, and then counties could opt in. And what happened was, as one county would opt in, great things happened. First of all, they saw voter turnout increase significantly. Second of all, it was actually cheaper to administer the elections, and they liked that. These rural counties, my county in particular was one, we really appreciated that because it was hard to have polling locations open in places where the city offices are only open a couple hours a week because they're so small. And so we were able to do that, and pretty soon we had all but just a couple counties left. Everybody had adopted it, and those last two came on board in 2018, I think. And so it happened slowly. People saw the benefits of it. People saw that it was working, and they felt comfortable with it. Now, if you had a state that overnight during COVID just decided to implement vote by mail, you could understand how there would be kind of a natural resistance to that. And that's something that I think we've certainly seen. And maybe they don't have all the security measures in place that we do. So we've been helping and advising other states. The lieutenant governor meets routinely with secretaries of state and other lieutenant governors that run elections, trying to help them improve their election security and the trust in elections.
Okay. We're just about out of time.
Okay.
But talking about elections, there's one coming up. The most contested one in the state right now is the Mike Lee, Evan McMullen Senate race. Your perspectives on that race?
Well, it's a fascinating race for a couple reasons. We have not had a close Senate race since 1976. 1976,
76.
I guess. That would have been Orrin Hatch's race against Frank Moss. I was one. I don't have a lot of memories of that race, but I'm told it was really close. It's interesting because Democrats don't have a candidate, so you've got somebody who was a Republican running as an independent, of course, having the support of Democrats. You've had two campaigns that are really interesting, a ton of money. We're not used to all the negative ads. Like if you ever visit Ohio this time of year or some of these other states, every ad is just a negative ad. It's insane. And here we are. Every ad is a negative ad. It sees you going back and forth. The polls are showing it's very close, although I think the most recent 538 polling has it at probably 7 points in Lee's favor, and their more sophisticated model has it in double digits still. I think that's probably accurate. I would be very surprised, but I've been surprised before to see if it would be much closer than that. It's really hard with an incumbent that has that much. But I don't know that either of them have run really great campaigns. If I'm being completely honest, I think when I see the senator who's a good friend of mine, on Fox News, going on with Tucker Carlson, I think like everybody watching that is already voting for you. Like you need to be talking to the voters who aren't watching that and getting them. Conversely, with Evan McMullin, like I've been to thousands of events as lieutenant governor and now governor across the state. Like I've never seen him in the wild. I mean, I'm sure I'm sure he's a great guy, but I've just never seen him at anything. Which I think you would want to be kind of at everything if you were running, a campaign for the Senate in the state of Utah. So, and again, I'm sure he's going places. They I guess are not places where I am. But so I don't think it's going to be as close as some of the polling says right now. I would be very surprised, but talk to me in a couple of weeks, and we'll see if I was right or if I was wrong.
Well, it's been a pleasure to have you. Before we finish up, Georgia Holiday asked a question that will really test your skills as a politician.
Oh, no. All right, Georgia.
So, and knowing that you graduated from Utah State, what's your favorite ice cream?
Okay, look, I'm an Aggie. I'm a true Aggie in every sense of the word. Very proud of that. And the Aggie Creamery is just fantastic. So I'm an Aggie ice cream guy, but all ice cream is wonderful. We should never denigrate any ice cream. I love the BYU Creamery as well. Spent a lot of time there. And seriously though, thank you. This matters, you guys. It really, really matters. You matter. The way you engage with other people matters. Please think about when you post on social media. I know we need to wrap up, but had an incredible conversation, a speech given by, and I've shared it before, but the ambassador from Switzerland to the United States, who basically told us, look, you guys, like we believe, and you don't hear this from Europeans very often, the United States is the leader on the world stage and has been. Every time there's been a crisis on the world stage, we look to you to solve that crisis. And I don't know if we can do that anymore because you're so divided internally, and we see what's happening in China, we see what's happening in Russia. If we're not strong and united, we can't engage on those big issues. And that starts with us. We can blame our politicians, but it starts with every one of us. And I think in a very real sense, what you post on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter has a direct line through to the power that Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping has in China, and our ability to stand up to them. So I know we don't usually associate those two things. I certainly hadn't, but hearing it from them, we need good people like you who are here today to please engage in a positive way. And I love you for it. Thank you.
Governor, thank you so much.